I want to thank you for what you've done on the book. I'm three-quarters of the way through it. It's just beautiful.
Thank you, Bob. Bob did a lot of work in that, did a lot of research on Abdullah, Pak Ramon, Ali, and a little bit on my uncles, and also, you know, we did a lot of work on Esfandiars and his talks and all that. Now that you mentioned it, I better, show this is the book. It's called The Boys, and it's a beautiful book of the accounts of the Paramashram boys, mainly on Chota Baba Ali and Esfandiar. Although the story goes on to talking about, different people who were in contact with these people, with Esfandiar, Chota Baba, or Ali, and
11 o'clock.
has a lot of beautiful stories. It's a book to read over and over again. I mean, even though I was in a lot of those talks, I see them beneficial. I read them.
What?
I think the books are available also at the Sharia bookstore if it's not already sold out. I heard that the second volume is coming up soon, in a couple of weeks. So hanging in there. I mean, if it's sold out, you'll get a new one. But I'm not here to talk about the book today. Just wanted to mention it. Maybe I'll read a little bit about it when the time comes. I think it's time for me to start.
Jai Baba, everyone. Yes, it is 11 o'clock. It's time to mute everybody. I apologize. It's nothing personal. We're just trying to get a very clean recording. There will still be the ability to communicate via chat if we're all muted, and also to digitally raise your hand. I will put in chat how to do that if you have any questions. Farshid, how would you like to handle questions? Do you want them as you go, or you want them at the end?
As we go, if it's not too much of a disruption, otherwise we leave it at the end.
Very good. So, folks, if anybody has questions, feel free to digitally raise your hand at any time, and the host will try to find a convenient time to pause the proceedings. But I think that for the most part, Farshid doesn't need much by way of introduction. I will just say that he has spent a great deal of time with Esfandiar, translating for him while he did his tours through the U.S., and I'm sure you spent a lot of time with him before that too, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
All right, without any further ado.
Just to start the meeting, I like to go back to the Paramashram time and the time that Baba wanted the boys to concentrate on him and be one-pointed towards him. With that said, we're going to say the beloved God prayer together, all of us, those who are present. And then after that, maybe 1 minute, we just close our eyes and try to image the beloved within us, and then repeat his name within us. So let's do that together. Beloved God.
Beloved God, help us all
to love you more and more,
and
more and more, and still yet more,
Till
till we become worthy of union with you. And help us all
Hold fast to Baba's Dhamma.
hold fast
Har Baba Ki Jai.
Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Baba Ki Jai.
So 1 minute.
You'll have to unmute.
So the reason, this came to my heart was to start talking about Paramashram, putting ourselves in the shoes of those boys in those days. And this was their first lesson in Paramashram that Baba gave them, to keep silence, to image him and repeat his name inwardly. And as this intensified and grew more and more within the boys, then they started experiencing basically the inner planes and that we can talk about. Especially, when Esfandiar shared his inner experiences, how Baba basically opened up that path for him. So with that said, I'd like to give a little background of how this Paramashram came about and how this all started. It was late 1926, early 1927 that Baba wanted to start a school called Meher Ashram and Baba Jan's High School. Basically, the high school was for older, educated people who wanted to come to stay with Baba. And then for Meher Ashram was younger kids who were in primary school, and Baba provided them accommodation, free boarding, and free food and everything. And Baidul, Agha Baidul was one of the Mandalis who was assigned by Baba in Iran to look for the boys who were interested in coming to India and stay with him and, be in that school. So Baidul basically put 14 of these boys together. And he brought them to India from what Esfandiar mentioned was May of 1927. They arrived in Mehrabad, and Baba greeted them all, and he had the tailor measure their height and all that and make uniforms. Baba had the uniforms for the boys for the school. And they had to wait for some time to get the uniforms ready, and eventually they started their school. Now, a lot of these boys, they came with this in their mind, that they want to come there and get a good education. They eventually become a doctor, an engineer, and have a good life. That's what it was in their mind. And that was how their parents basically gave this permission, a 5-year permission with signature, that they give their boys to Baba for that good education. With that, they all come. Not only those 14s, a lot of people, also kids from India, from all over the world, came to stay in those schools. Now I'm going to go back to Esfandiar because I can relate to him more in a way of my communication with him. So he came, he wanted to become an engineer. He had this desire of becoming an engineer. And sitting in his classroom, eventually after, they got their uniforms and they go to their classroom, he was assigned Rao Sahib, who is Khosrow Afzari, as one of the teachers. So the teacher starts, going through the literature, Persian literature, and try to educate Esfandiar. I think Esfandiar, from what he said, he was the only student in that class at that time. As Khosrow was, going through different literature of Iran and try to kind of give this education that Baba wanted to the boys, he comes across some couplets from Bustan of Sadi, and one of the couplets says that رسد آدمی به جایی که به جز خدا نبیند بنگر که تا چه حد است مکان آدمیت. So the couplet says, man will get to a point that will not see anything except God. So see how high the abode of human being is. But when this was read to him, suddenly something kindles in him, that what is this? I mean, is this really true that man will see God? So he starts asking questions to the teacher. And Khosrow said, yes, the whole purpose of this creation is for man to become God and to realize his true identity of being one with God. And then he goes on, reciting other couplets. And Esfandiar says, that was it for me. I thought to myself, then what is the purpose of me coming here, getting education and becoming an engineer or a doctor, if after all I have to leave all behind and go? If the whole purpose is to become one with God, why should I not ask for that main thing rather than these mundane things? So he tells his, he doesn't say anything actually to Khosrow, but he loses his interest in studying. He doesn't study anymore. He doesn't pay attention to schoolwork anymore. And Khosrow Afzari really doesn't know how to deal with him. Eventually, he takes the complaint to Baba that, Esfandiar, is not studying anymore, and he has lost interest in studying, and he's looking through the sky all the time and not paying attention to me at all. So one day Baba comes, and now Esfandiar was heartbroken earlier because when he came and he was in the line, when he came from Iran, and he was in the line, Baba greeted every boy until he got to him, and then he walked away without giving him the opportunity to bowing down to him, or, Baba harassed all the other kids, but when he got to him, he basically left. So this was very hard on him, and he was heartbroken. He said, what a filthy, bad person I am that Baba didn't even wait for me to bow down to him or even paying any attention to me. So this was really hard. But here, now he's looking through the sky, and suddenly he realizes that Khosrow Afzari bowed down, and he looks back and he sees Baba right behind him. And Baba grabs him and embraces him, holds him in his arms, and he says, I heard that you're not studying. What is the problem? And Esfandiar said, Baba, I can't study. I don't have any interest in studying anymore. Now his plan was to run away, go to the woods and, eat wild fruits and think of God. And that night actually was his last night to run away. And then Baba was here talking to him. And then he starts asking questions. Okay, if you don't study, I send you to Bombay to your uncle. And Esfandiar says, okay, that would be good. If he sends me to Bombay, I'll go into the woods and I don't have to worry about it anymore. And Baba, all knowing, suddenly says, no, I'll send you back to Iran, to your parents. And he says, well, if he sends me back to Iran, then my father probably wants me to work in the farm and will get me married, and that won't be something that I like. So then he has no other choice than telling Baba. And Baba says, okay, if you don't tell me why you're not studying, I'll send you back to Iran. And Esfandiar says, Baba, I want to see God. And then that was the beginning, basically. Baba brings him out, takes him back to his office, puts him down on the floor, and he himself goes under a cover, a white sheet, and stays under that cover while Esfandiar is sitting on the floor. And then he comes out and takes Esfandiar by the hand to the other side of the existing the Ramsala. Actually, that was his school at the time. So he takes him behind the Ramsala, and there was a mandali waiting for Baba with that rickshaw that is in the museum. And then Baba goes up on the rickshaw and tells Esfandiar, come up on the rickshaw. So Esfandiar goes up on the rickshaw, and the mandalis start pulling the rickshaw through Arangown up to Upper Mehrabad. As the rickshaw was moving, it was, bouncing back and forth, and Esfandiar is about to fall, that Baba says, hold on to my arm, because there was no room. If you see that rickshaw is so narrow, no room for anybody to sit next to Baba. So Baba says, hold on to my arm. So as Esfandiar is standing right in front of Baba, he holds to Baba's arm, and they go all the way to Upper Mehrabad. And then from then, Baba said, okay, you come down. Esfandiar gets off the rickshaw, Baba comes down himself and then says, you want to see God? I'll show you God. But you have to obey me implicitly, 100%. From now on, you keep silence. You only repeat God's name. He doesn't say even my name, because Esfandiar says at that time I didn't know that Baba was God. I knew he's a holy man. He hadn't married and he was a holy man, but I didn't know he was God himself. So Baba says, repeat God's name. And then from now on, I am your father, your mother, your brother, sister, and all. Don't think of anything else except me. And I will show you God. And then he said, if accidentally you break your silence, you say a word, come and see Sidhu, one of the mandaris, and he'll bring you to me, and we'll sort it out at that time. So anyway, he said that went on for 6 months, and he was the first Paramashram boy, and then other boys slowly joined in. And Baba started the Paramashram, the ashram of love, that with his presence and his inner guidance to these boys, he elevated them to a higher level of consciousness and higher inner experiences. I'm going to stop right here, see if there is any question that I can answer, and then ask the audience what they want to hear. I can go from there.
Two things. One is, I remember when he was going up on the rickshaw, because it was so bouncy, Baba said, this is like the spiritual path. It's very rocky, and if you don't hold on to me, you will fall off. And I remember that he gave that analogy to Esfandiar. But I was wondering, Farshid, if you could tell a little bit up in the East Room where the Prem Ashram boys lived. I'm not sure how many boys were there at the time, but could you describe what it was like when Esfandiar would be there doing his work, and then Baba would start coming up the hill and he would see him before he physically saw him?
Yeah, that was later time when Esfandiar had spent quite some time in the Paramashram. And as you mentioned, I kind of didn't go through the details of, explaining everything because it takes time. But I'm glad you brought that up with the rocky and, the bumpiness of the road and comparing that. Baba made an analogy. You're right that, yeah, you saw how bumpy the road was. That is exactly how the spiritual path is. If you hadn't hold on to me, you would have fallen off. So here, if you don't obey me, you will fall off the path also. So this was the analogy that Bama made, and I'm glad you brought that up again. But as you mentioned, in the East Room, that was their meditation and sleeping quarters. On the West Room, it was the daily activities. Baba sometimes would hold meetings and would gather the boys there and would, kind of talk, gesture to them, and Baidu sometimes, most of the time, would translate Baba's gestures. But in the East Room, Baba had made cubicles with matting, with bamboos, and they all had kind of cubicles next to each other. And that was the place that they would sit and meditate during the night, or they would take a rest if they were tired. And in the later time, this was before they were sent back to Iran, Esfandiar said, my experiences were very beautiful. I had a lot of inner sight of Baba. Baba would appear to me in shimmering light, and the nightingales would sing to me at night as I was lying down on that bed of mine. And sometimes when I would sit and meditate on Baba, I was so close with Baba that I would see Baba physically coming up to the East Room. And in a way, he would say that I would see Baba behind this rock wall. And as soon as I would open my eyes, Baba would walk through the door, come in, and Baidul would hold the lantern, standing there. And a lot of times at the end of his years, he would remember those moments because it was so beautiful in a way that would create the intense longing in him. He would cry by explaining that, yes, Baba would come in the middle of the night, I would see him, and then he would come right above my head, would put his hand on my head, and I would embrace his feet. And then Baba would ask me, okay, tell me about your experiences. And then I would start explaining that. Baba would say, okay, enough. Now do it this way. So Baba inwardly would change his method of inner communion with him and God being the same. And he would continue basically the work. And then he would say, I would hold Baba's feet so tight, and the time would come that Baba had to leave. So he would shake his legs, and I would know that Baba wants to go. So I would let him loose, and Baba would walk away. So this was a good lesson also to a lot of us at the time, because he would mention that. He would say, if you want to go this path of love, this path of prem, this path of premashram, you have to find a way that it provokes that love within you intensely. And the way he would describe it, sometimes he would say, okay, look at it this way, that a picture of Baba or a scene of Baba that has a great impact on you, you have to image that scene all the time and then try to create that love. And that will basically help you to go through the path. So the main focus of Esfandiar was Baba. And all he wanted to convey to us, from what I got through my years of translating for him or being with him, was that you have to purify that love within you. You have to intensify that love within you. And as you intensify that love becomes like a big fire that will slowly burn all your attachments and karmic connections to this world and will make you ready and purified for the divinity. So one has to make that effort. That's the effort of love. One has to make that effort of purification until the divine love comes. Otherwise, the divine love will never show up. One analogy of the divine love and the intense love, with a little love, I can give you a little example, is that, if you have a little pain, like somebody punctures you with a needle, you have a little pain. Then somebody knocks you on the head with a bat, maybe, then you have a bigger pain. Now, you can see how the intensity of the pain is. And sometimes the agony of the pain becomes so much that you cannot even bear it, and you might go unconscious. Now go to the opposite side of that. The analogy is very similar to love. Now, you might see a picture of Baba and you like it and say, hey, beautiful, I love that. But that's only like a puncture of a needle in your feet, in analogy with the pain. Now, you might see a scene of, Baba walking in a movie or washing the foot of a leopard or embracing a mouse or something, and that would create more love in you and say, oh, Baba, what a love, this is love. Now that becomes like somebody hitting you on the back, hitting you on the head with the bat. But the love that is a divine love that makes one united one with God is the divine love that one loses consciousness of himself and only God remains. That is when one loses consciousness, like, in the pain. So you have to have that love that you lose consciousness of yourself, and it's not you anymore, and it's only him. And Rumi also talks about that love. He says, the love becomes so intense that I became you, you became me. And from now on, nobody could say who I am or who you are. Basically, the lover and the beloved became one. And Baba asks and demands that love. And he deserves that love, that pure love, that divine love. So, the best we can do is where we are, with the love that we have for him. We all have that love. Because he said, I have come to sow the seed of love in your hearts. But in spite of all diversities, it will basically, grow and germinate and become a good, strong love. And that is promised to us. But in the meantime, we have to keep our promise to him and try to purify that love. Try not to seek mundane mundane stuff, but to seek his love. And as we get away from mundane stuff, the love becomes more purified and becomes more intense, and eventually the lover will be consumed in that love for the beloved. I hope I could explain a little bit of what I felt with Esfandiar and how he learned all this from Baba, experienced them by Baba, through Baba, and then he gave a little gist of that experience to all of us, and that I could share here.
Farshid, Marjan. I came in just as you said that he was the first. He was the first Prem Ashram boy. I wanted to hear that again. Yeah.
Yeah, that is correct. God's plan on earth, however that is, becomes so natural. Even the spiritual path is nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, some people say, oh my God, the guy is on the fourth plane or third plane. It's not out of the ordinary. If you love Baba with the purity of that love, with the divine love, the natural course of going through the path will happen, and it's not out of the ordinary for the person who goes through the path. Now, for him to start the Pramashram for Baba, he made it so natural, so automatic in a way that he didn't say, okay, I'm going to stop, Meher Ashram here and start the Pramashram. No. Esfandiar's desire was provoked in him to become one with God rather than, seeking education. So Baba, in a very natural way, brought him up on a rickshaw to Upper Mehrabad and set him up there on Upper Mehrabad and told him, he didn't tell him you're the first Pramashram boy or anything, no. He said, you want to see God, you obey me implicitly, 100%. You become one-pointed. You think of me and nothing else. I'm your father, brother, sister, mother, everybody. You don't think of anything else except me. So he said that in him, and he started his natural way of life of loving God and basically progressing through the path. And then other boys slowly, they got interested too. And they came up, and Baba brought them up. So the Upper Mehrabad basically became the Pramashram. The Lower Mehrabad, Baba had their Meher Ashram and their Baba Jan High School and all that. Some of these boys never left the Meher Ashram or the high school, and some of them they did. And they came up to Pramashram. They wanted to know more about God and basically to love God more than, get education. So Baba brought them to Pramashram, like Chota Baba, Abdullah Pakrawan, who came from Bandar Abbas from Iran. And he was an older person. He was like, I think, 17, 18 years old. And he heard about Baba's school. He came. He wasn't one of those 14 boys who came from Iran, but he came by himself. And he came to the school, and he had heard that there is a good education that he can get here and become a doctor or engineer. And he was a very smart person. His education was excellent. And one day in one of these meetings, Baba said, if you want, the gestures to Allah, I can make gold out of you. And then he gestures, he wants it. And Baba puts his hat on his head. And that was it. He forgot all about his schooling. He He forgot about his body even. He sat in a corner for hours and hours thinking of God. And then he was in a verge of dropping his body that Baba basically took him to the hospital and then slowly brought him down to the consciousness of human being and also having the consciousness of the sixth plane. Baba said he's on the sixth plane, stationed on the sixth plane. And, you know, he did a lot of work with Abdullah Pakram. We called him Chota Baba. So he became another Prema Ashram boy. There were other Prema Ashram boys, like one of my uncles, Khosrow, ended up in Prema Ashram. But the other one, Khodayar, stayed in Mer Ashram. Shahpur Berdadi was another boy in Iran that he stayed in Mer Ashram, never came to Prema Ashram. Lobaji was another person, but he came to Prema Ashram. There were many, many other, I think 30-some boys that ended up in Prema Ashram. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, I'm hoping, Farshid John, that you'll speak about Esfandiar. Here's a sixth plane involuted person and that Baba sends back to Iran. He's back in Iran and he ends up going back to the world. And I'm hoping you will touch on aspects of his life in the world and how he managed that, how he managed to stay connected with Baba and develop his inner life as well as living in the world. I hope you can talk about that a little.
Sure. Yeah, you know, in 1929, Baba says that my work is done with the Prema Ashram, and he closes the school. And before he closes the school, he tells every boy that I want you to promise me one thing, and to obey me one thing, if I ask you. And this is for Esfandiar, I say, but the boy, I'm sure all the rest of the boys were the same. Even my uncle said the same thing, that, you know, before Baba asked that, you know, commitment, they knew what Baba wanted from them. So he asked Esfandiar, for example, I want you to go back to Iran and think of me there. I am there also with you. Esfandiar said, before Baba would ask me that, I knew that, and I wanted the whole earth would open its mouth and swallow me than me going back to Iran. But because Baba wanted that commitment from me, I said, Baba, I will. And then I went back to Iran, and there were a lot of questions. Okay, when you went back, what did you do? He basically made a small little room in their house that he later years, he took me there and showed it to me. He said that this was the room that I would sit down and meditate a lot of times, you know, stay, basically be with Baba, you know, just enjoy his presence and occupy myself with Baba rather than the world. And then we would ask, you know, did you help your father? And our father had a farm. I mean, if he asked you to do anything, would you do? He said, yes, I would help him, but whenever he wouldn't need my help, I would rather to be with Baba and occupy myself with Baba. And then Baba goes back to Iran in 31, 2 years later, that he said that my father had hidden my birth certificate so that I don't run away and go to Baba. And when Baba came, now this is when Baba came and left. Esfandiar's father tells his mother that what happened to him. And then his mother, Esfandiar's mother, tells Esfandiar. So that's why how Esfandiar knew that when Baba came to Iran, he came to Jafarabad, that was their village, and everybody, and Jafarabad, Baidul's house is here, and then Esfandiar's house is right across there. So basically next to each other. And his mother, Esfandiar's mother, had made a little pillow, and he wouldn't let anyone, she wouldn't let anyone to touch that pillow because she was keeping that for the time that Baba comes, so Baba could use it. And before Baba came, she puts it on the veranda, and Baba comes into their house and goes and sits right on that pillow that Esfandiar's mother had made. And then Esfandiar's father goes and brings Esfandiar's birth certificate and gives it to Baba. Baba looks at that, opens that and looks at that and says, Vessali, because the last name is Esfandiar Vessali. Vessali in Persian means in union with. So Baba gestures Vessali. He needs to come to me to become the real Vessali. He's become the real union. He has to come to me. And then he gives the birth certificate back to his father. Now, when Baba goes and stays in the city of Yas for 4 days, and the kids go and visit him there, after Baba leaves, Baba's father tells Esfandiar's mother that, you know, when before Baba came, it was like me being bound to a board, you know, like being imprisoned, not being free. But when I saw Baba walking in this sand, all the binds were broken off of me, and I was feeling free. And I was running after Baba. I was running so free. And that's why he brought the birth certificate, to give it to Baba. That now, you know, you can do whatever you want with my son. And Baba gives it back to him. So, so the father finally, you know, realized who Baba was, although the mother already was very dedicated to Baba. Anyway, Esfandiar grows up a little older and moves to Tehran with a saintly man, who Esfandiar said he was on the second plane of consciousness. And he had met Baba, Usta Khodaram. So he, with Usta Khodaram, he would help Usta Khodaram and the family and all that. So they stayed together like a group, knowing of Baba, loving Baba. So he grew up. He had no intention of marrying, but when he saw his wife Shirin, and she didn't want to marry either, something clicks, and anyway, they get married. And he had 3 kids, 3 boys actually. Now, we asked him a lot of questions on, okay, you came to Iran, how was it life for you in Iran? You got married, you raised 3 kids, you had a family life, and how did it all help you or hindered you in your path? He said, well, if I hadn't married, now this was his take on that. He said, if I hadn't married, I probably would have progressed in the path, but my progress was hindered. I didn't progress anymore. Baba had said he was on the 3rd plane of consciousness when he was in Prem-ashram. But after the kids grew older and he retired, kind of thinking more of God, other things happened in his life that basically pushed him through the path to the 5th, and for the fact that at the end of his life he was on the 6th plane of consciousness. Because indirectly he kind of told me about that once. So that was a life that he lived, and his life was an example, was a good example of how one should love Baba and be dedicated to him. I'll give you an example of my own, something that happened to me when I was a young kid in Iran. In the meeting, I was sitting in the meeting, and at the meeting they were reading from Mir Baba Calling, and it was a translation in Persian. And in one of those callings, Baba says, if you have the peace of a frozen lake, you will realize me. And as they were reading this passage, I looked, as a kid, I looked around the room to see who has the piece of this frozen lake that Baba is talking about. And my glance fell on Esfandiar. I saw him with his closed eyes, beaming of light. I didn't know Esfandiar at the time, who, his relation with Baba. We knew we had met Baba. That's how much I knew. And when my eyes fell on him, I said, if anyone has the piece of a frozen lake, it would be this person. And that was it. And then it came a day, and this also I didn't know. It came a day that I didn't know that Baba had given his sadra, his pink coat, his sandals. It was a brownish type of a sandal to Esfandiar for Iranian group. Now, the meetings in Iran were on Friday, and then there were a couple of other meetings that started. One was basically reading and translating God Speaks that would happen on Monday evenings, and then sometimes there were other, private meetings too that we would go to. Anyway, one of these meetings, Esfandiar says, I have something that I'd like to share with everyone. And you're now, his room, the room where the meeting, it was sided to another room, and it was closed by a curtain. So he went to the back room through the curtain, and then he brought the boxes and laid down in front of Baba's picture. One was Baba's sandals, one was Baba's sadra, and then the pink coat. And he uncovered it. Then he said, for those who haven't had Baba's physical darshan, they can have Baba's physical darshan. And he asked each one of us who want to take or to have Baba's physical darshan to go to his sadra and coat and sandal and bow down to it. I remember, I think I was the first in the line, but I couldn't go forward. I mean, I was frozen in the ground. I couldn't go forward. And just couldn't hold myself either. The whole atmosphere had changed. It wasn't an ordinary atmosphere. It was the presence of God. You could feel that presence. It was different. And the tears were rolling down my cheeks like crazy. I couldn't hold myself. Finally, I saw myself not being able to go forward and not being able to do anything. I just ran off. I just took the hallway, ran off into the yard. And then Esfandiar ran after me. He came. He embraced me. I But the reason I'm all saying that it's all a link, these are all linked. I don't know anything about these things. He was sent to Iran. Baba provided that link for him to be with that saintly man, and to have the link with his wife and other Baba lovers. So the link Baba provides. And that link Baba provided for me. So anyway, he embraced me and he said, I appreciate your love. And then he brought me back to the room. Now this time I was mellowed out a little bit, although I was still crying, but I could bow down to Baba's physical presence. And I felt that presence at that time. So going back to Fareshta's question, although he might appear to open a window for you, he will open another 10 doors so you can go through. And he provides you that link, that connection with those who love him. So that makes your love stronger for him through that love. And that's, how his life was in Iran, and his life was an example, not only to me, to many, many others who came in contact with him. It wasn't his contact, it was Baba's contact. It was the presence of Baba that he would bring. So through that presence of Baba that he would bring, you would feel Baba's presence. And that was something, a miracle to me, how Baba had made that miracle, that him, Baba, not being in his physical presence, still, he could give you that physical presence if you wanted. Now, Damien might remember that occasion, and Jeff also, and maybe some others, that occasion that we had in Del Robo, very similar to this. Now, at Del Robo in Myrtle Beach, we are sitting, Esfandiar is sitting on my right, and Darwin is sitting on my left, or vice versa, I don't remember that now. Suddenly, Esfandiar says something, I translate for Darwin, Darwin says something, I translate for Esfandiar. Through this back and forth, I felt here I have two souls, great souls, being in love with the beloved, and have been in Baba's physical presence. And how would that physical presence be? And I suddenly burst into tears. I couldn't hold myself. And Darwin asked me, what's going on? What's wrong with you? I said, Darwin, I miss Baba's physical presence. He actually smiled and said, I do too. And then, through all this, the talk slowly diminished, nobody talked anymore, and everyone went into some kind of a deep meditation and deep longing and love for Baba. We all felt that deep connection and deep love. And the atmosphere was full of Baba's presence, full of God's presence. No doubt about that. after maybe 10, 15 minutes that this happened, Darwin's, Darwin's care person, Summer, her name was Summer, she got up and said, Darwin, I have to give you pills and I haven't brought them with me and getting late, so we need to go. Darwin obediently said, okay, let's go. And he got up and I helped Esfandiar to get up because he had broken his hip at the time and he was on cane. So I helped him. He came to the door to greet Darwin goodbye. As Darwin is leaving, Esfandiar turns back to me and says, did you feel that presence? And I said, yes, I did. And then he said, that is Baba's presence. That is God's presence. So he showed me practically, physically, Baba's presence in that meeting because I had such a longing of Baba's presence. And I'm not sure if that's why I asked Damien, and Jeff might remember that too, but if they were there at the time. I don't know how much time I have, but...
Oh, we have all the time in the world. Farshid, Stuart Baker wondered again. I didn't remember if I heard either how old Esfandiar was when he went to Iran, what his age was.
He must have been 18, 17, 18 years at the time. Because sometime, now I'm not sure exactly, because he told me once his mother took his birth certificate a little older than what he was. So but he said that I went to Baba when I was 13 years old. But by looking at his birth certificate, he went to Baba when he was 16 years old. So if his birth certificate was kept a little older, he was really 13. And by the time he went back to Iran, he would have been 15. But if his birth certificate was correct, then he would have gone to Baba when he was 16, and he would have gone to Iran when he was 18. So I think in a real sense, he was 15 when he went back to Iran.
Thank you. And also, we have a question. Judy Robertson has been waiting patiently her turn. So Judy, I'm going to unmute you.
Hey, Baba, Judy.
Hey, Baba Farshid, Marjan, wonderful to see both of you. We miss you here in Seattle. Farshid, I have two requests. One, please go deeper into what Esfandiar, his advice to us about experiencing divine love. I think you were starting to speak about that before all the questions. And secondly, can you share with us about Esfandiar's relationship, his friendship with Chota Baba? I understand that Esfandiar, that they were friends, and that Esfandiar was the one that asked him, you know, when Chota Baba was looking at him, what do you see? And he said, Baba. And I believe it was either a box of matches or he lit a match and asked, what do you see? And he said, Baba, and so forth. So if you could share more about their relationship at some point.
Okay. Yeah, going to your first question, you know, as I mentioned earlier, and this is what Esfandiar was emphasizing to all of us, was that to see God the way he really is, the way God really is, one has to lose consciousness of oneself through love. Now, you know, this starts from from very natural loving of Baba to basically to a degree that one loses consciousness of God. Now, the way that Baba taught the Paramashram boys that Esfandiar shared with us was the beginning of this is like, you know, looking at a picture of Baba that you like the most, and you try to image that by closing your eyes, and then try to love it. I mean, you having a busy life maybe in the West, it might not be possible to do this all the time, especially if you're younger, you have a working 8-to-5 job. It's not possible. You know, you can't leave everything and think of God. It's not natural also. But to do it naturally, you know, you try to spare some time, think of him, image him, repeat his name. And as this becomes more pleasant to your soul, which eventually it will, you slowly start losing interest in the world also. Now, for lucky souls like Esfandiar, this happened in an early age. For a lot of us not so lucky, it might happen in later years when we get retired, when we don't have a worldly, you know, commitment that we have to attend to all the time. So basically the world kind of leaves us alone a little bit, and we can dedicate more time to Baba. And the more we dedicate that time to Baba, the closer we get, and the closeness that we feel with him, the strengthen that intuition within us. And from there on, the mind doesn't decide anymore, your intuition decides. And you have to let go of the mind and listen to your intuition. I promise you, if you listen to your intuition, you never go wrong. A lot of times my mind and intuition were struggling, and I listened to my mind and I lost. A lot of times again, I tested that and I listened to my intuition, and it, you know, it went way better. So I promise you, intuition never goes wrong. So when your intuition becomes stronger, your love also becomes stronger. And as your love grows, it becomes to a point that you don't talk from the mind anymore. Your heart speaks out. Your heart decides. And people will even get guidance through you, through your heart, through your love for God. So one has to strengthen that love to the point that one has no identity except the beloved. So basically one becomes consumed in that love. The consciousness of the self diminishes completely, and one becomes one with God at that point. Now there is a lot of pull back and forth, there is a lot of friction. It's not going to happen quickly, so don't worry. You won't merge into God quickly. It takes time and a struggle. But that's the way it should be. That's the way one has to strengthen that love. And you will feel actually how that love is getting more purified. You will feel that purification. The purification also helps you to help others. The purification becomes in a point that now you become a vehicle, you become a media for the beloved's work. The beloved does do his work through you. You feel that it's not you who is spreading his message of love and truth anymore. It's him doing it through you. because now you have become the media for his work. You will feel that. That's natural, normal. When you feel that, then the burden is not on you either. He will take charge. He is the one in charge of everything anyway. It's just the mind and the friction of the mind that blocks that inner connection. If that goes away, it's nothing left of you, it's only him. So that's the divinity, the purification of the heart, the divinity of love, the pure love. Going back to the second question of Chota Baba, when Esfandiar was in Paramashram, he remembers that Chota Baba was in the hospital. And the hospital was, again, Baba would make quickly something out of nothing, like, would put up bamboo walls and call that a hospital. And that was the hospital for the boys. And Chota Baba was in one of those in Upper Mehrabad. And Esfandiar goes to visit him in that hospital, and he sees Chota Baba is lying down. And Esfandiar sees a box of matches. He grabs that and takes it to Chota Baba and says, Abdullah, what is this? He looks at the box of matches and says, Baba. Then he shows him something else and says, Baba. Then he says, do you see me, Abdullah? Do you see me? He says, yes. He says, who am I? He says, Baba. So no matter what he would show him or what he would ask him, he would say Baba. So he would see Baba in everything and everyone. But that was an incident that he related to Chota Baba in those days. And later on, he comes to Iran. Baba sends the boys to Iran. Chota Baba, although stays with Baba, but later in 31, I guess, he comes with Baba. But this time he doesn't want to go with Baba. Baba says, come with me. I'll take you to West and all that. And Chota Baba says, no, Baba, I've given you enough headache and trouble. I like to stay here and make my own livelihood. So Baba says, okay, from now on, if you keep silence, don't touch money, and don't touch women, you will be fine. You will have your experiences of the sixth plane, and I will help you. So years pass, and Esfandiar's connection with Chota Baba kind of breaks until many, many years later. And Esfandiar goes to Bandar Abbas, where Chota Baba was living at the time, to visit him, see how he's doing and all that. And when he goes there, he sees Chota Baba has started a big business. I mean, it's a huge warehouse that he has, importing water pumps, agricultural pumps, selling them, and parts, and many employees and all that. And when he sees Chota Baba, he says, Abdullah, what is all this? I thought by being on the sixth plane of consciousness, you have helped a lot of souls by now. And Chota Baba says, well, let me tell you all that happened after Baba left me. And then they sit down together, and Chota Baba says, yes, Baba gave me these 3 instructions, keep silence, don't touch money, don't speak. Yeah, don't touch money, don't speak. Basically keep silence, and don't touch women, and you'll be fine. They said, for some time, I kept those and had no, fallback. nothing. I had my experience of the sixth plane, but I started this business basically to make my livelihood. But the business started picking up. In the beginning, I wouldn't answer the phone. I was silent. I wouldn't touch money. Somebody else was taking care of it. And I wouldn't care about, wife or home or anything like that. But they said, as the business grew, the phone would ring, nobody would answer it, so it frustrated me. Eventually, I said, okay, I'm going to answer the phone myself. So he started speaking and answering the phone. So he said, even after that, I was fine. I had my experiences. I was in bliss all the time. Not a problem. Then he said, somebody was taking care of the business, accounts, getting money, paying money and all that. And sometimes the money would come short. Sometimes, I said, no, this is not going to work. I got to, handle the money myself. So we start basically touching the money, receiving money, giving money. So Chota said, even after this, I was still fine. I had my experience and all that. But then came to a point that I would go home after a day of work, a long day of work. I would go home, no food was there ready for me. The bed was not made. I was in bad shape. So I hired a maid, basically. And the maid would come and, clean the house, and make food and all that. So it was good, I was happy. Everything was good. But it came to a point that I decided to marry the maid. He said, after I married the maid, it was like a dark cloud that came over me and blocked my consciousness. After that, I came to ordinary consciousness. No consciousness of the sixth plane anymore. Nothing. And then there is a tape of him actually talks, and in that tape he says, I don't know how many more lifetimes I have to come, but right now I am, an ordinary conscious person, but I might have to come 1 lifetime, 2 lifetimes, 3 lifetimes to get the consciousness I had with Baba. From what I heard in the last days of his life, he regretted his breaking of his promise with Baba and losing what he had. So we asked Esfandiar, why do you think this all happened? And he said, when the father has a wealth and he gives you his wealth and says, okay, here is the wealth. These are how you protect your wealth. And Baba gave him the wealth, told him how to protect it, but he did not protect it the way the father wanted. So he lost all that wealth.
Thank you. Yeah, what you say is so true. I just wanted to tell you that when I received the book, it felt like I was receiving a warm hand around my heart. And every time I open the book, that same feeling comes through. So I just want to thank you for all the love and effort you put into putting it together, because it's a precious thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Baba. Thank you. Yeah, Bob did a lot of work.
You too. Yeah. The other thing is that in the early part of your talk, you mentioned Baba going under a sheet and asking Esfandiar to stay in the same place he was in. And it appeared to me that Baba actually did that to wipe away his sanskaras of his particular lifetime now, because of the fact that he was part of what Baba was going to do, that is separate the Prem Ashram boys from the rest of the school, which he eventually did. And Esfandiar, to me, became significant of the purity that Baba was going to give to the Prem Ashram boys, for what it's worth.
Yeah, that is correct. Actually, that question was asked from Esfandiar, that why do you think Baba went under that sheet? Because Esfandiar said before Baba went under that sheet, Baba was rosy. He had a beautiful color and absolutely beautiful. But when he came out of that sheet, he was very pale, yellow, like being jaundiced. And people asked him then, why do you think Baba did that? And Esfandiar for sure mentioned the same thing. He said that, yes, Baba did that to clean up a lot of my sanskaras and make me ready for the pranasham. So absolutely right. You're right.
Hello, Farshid.
Jai Baba, how are you?
Hey, Baba. Great to see you.
Good to see
And thank you again for the beautiful book that you
Thank you,
wrote.
Baba. Thank you,
Baba
Baba.
wrote. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I've got two questions and different kinds of questions. So the first one's very specific and the second one's broader. The first question is about, because we were just talking about this in a small group yesterday, about Esfandiar's experience when he broke his hip. And what I remember, but I just was asking you to confirm it, that he was on the third plane of consciousness at that time, and that his experience there, I understood, helped shift him into the fifth plane and over the fourth plane. And I was wondering if you can either verify that or if you have comments about that.
Sure.
So that's my first question. You want to hear the second one now too?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So the second one, and I think there's a reluctance for Esfandiar maybe to speak about this based on the book, but maybe you have thoughts about what you think the meaning is of the Prem Ashram in terms of Baba's universal work, because it certainly seems connected to Baba's universal work. You know, all that he did there, he spent so much time, so much focus on it, all that he did with Aga Ali, traveling around the world, you know, the work he did in Iran and so on, that it certainly seemed to tie into something larger. And I know that there was, I got a sort of reluctance to sort of speculate about that from the book, but I'm still, you spend enough time around Esfandiar. I'd really love to hear your thoughts about that. So those are my two questions.
Sure, thank you. Going back to your first question, you know, Esfandiar, you know, it was told by Baba that he was on the third plane of consciousness when he was in Premashram. And he went back to Iran. From what I understood, after he got married, he said that it hindered his progress. Until later years that he had married, they had actually a dog, I think, that was barking a lot and had stolen one of the shoe, and Esfandiar runs after the dog to get the shoe back and kind of make him quiet because he was meditating. And unfortunately, he falls off from the balcony on some brick that were laid down on the ground over there, and he breaks his hip. When he breaks his hip, his wife also had broken her hip because of old age. And they were both kind of in in an immobile type of a way that they couldn't do anything much. They couldn't help each other either. Only their son sometimes would come and help them to go to bathroom or, do their nature call or whatever, his younger son. And one of these nights that Esfandiar now is sitting in meditation, in the middle of this meditation, he hears his wife's agony of pain, and she's calling for someone to help to go to the bathroom and all that. And Esfandiar calls out to his son, who unfortunately was sound asleep, not waking up. And in this agony of him and his wife, he has no other choice than surrendering to Baba and asking Baba's help. And by doing that, basically, he goes into a meditation. He said the meditation was a deep meditation because I was in this agony and helplessness. Through this helplessness and agony, he goes into such a deep meditation that suddenly he feels infinite power in him. And feeling this infinite power, he says, well, let me try this power and see if I can do anything with it. So he says, my look fell on the shelf and there was a book on the shelf. I said, well, let me see if I can lift this book off the shelf with my power. And he says, as soon as I looked at the shelf and I tried to lift the book off the shelf, I felt that I can't do it. It's blocked. So I felt, well, maybe I should use this infinite power and see if I can use this power to love Baba even the more. So he says, I've channeled that power into loving Baba more. He says, when I did that, I experienced being in an infinite ocean of love and losing myself in this infinite ocean of love. And he said, I lost myself. It wasn't me anymore. And he said, that was the divine purity of the love that I felt, the intense love that I felt. And through that, although he indirectly didn't talk much about it, he said, Baba gave me the experience of infinite power, which is on the fourth plane of consciousness, but he blocked me off. But using that for his love, he brought me back on the third and pushed me to the fifth plane, because that purity, the divinity of that love, is only on the fifth plane of consciousness. And he's stationed in that fifth plane of consciousness until later years that he came to Myrtle Beach, and then he talked about some of other of his experiences that, for a fact, I realized he being on the sixth plane of consciousness. So that was that experience that he shared with us. Now, going back to your next question, what was the next question? Tell me a little. I lost that question.
Daniel, do you want to repeat about, I think it was about universal.
Oh.
Yeah, about universal work. Daniel?
Universal work of the Pramashram.
Oh, yeah. You know, when the avatar comes, I was mentioning that earlier, his work is universal. It's not for one individual person. I mean, he comes for the whole universe. Not only the human being on this planet, on the 18,000 other planets. Not only for creatures on this planet, on many, many other planets. He comes to give a push to the whole creation, basically. And his work with the mast, with the mad, the new life that he went through, and many, many other phases of life that he went through. You know, fiery life, fiery free life, Manonash, all of these, very universal, including the Paramashram, Sadik Ashram. They were all universal. It wasn't, the Paramashram was not just for Esfandiar or Chota Baba or Ali or others who were in that Paramashram. It was universal. It is for every one of us who choose to go through that life. And that is why he set example of people like Chota Baba or Esfandiar or Farshid Namiranian or others who came and shared their life and stories with us of Baba to basically let us know also that life can be lived. Now, how do you live a life of a Paramashram boy? It is simple. You have to live the life that Baba wanted for those boys. That becomes the life of a Paramashram. What was the life of those boys? If you look at them, Baba instructed them all mostly uniformly the same thing. Think of God, repeat his name, image him within you. Spend, if not all of your time, most of your time thinking of God. So that was the life of a Paramashram boy or a girl. Baba put boys there, but that doesn't mean that the girls cannot go through that life. It's for everyone. It's for those who want to go through that life. But it's a life of purification. It's a life that one wants to become closer to God, and it's a life for one to become one with God eventually through love. So the love is the key, and the more you love, the purer the soul becomes, and the soul becomes more deserve of that path, of that love. And as the soul, loves and loves, the path of love opens, and the soul starts experiencing the inner journey. It's nothing unnatural. The inner experiences, although they all happen in the domain of illusion, but they are of a better and purer understanding than the illusion itself, because shows that the soul is becoming purified. So the more the purification happens, the subtler the soul gets. The gross world eventually goes behind, and the soul goes through the subtle planes of consciousness, and then eventually mental planes of consciousness, and becomes one with God. And that is for every soul going through that path. Actually, we asked Esfandiar, does every soul have to really experience the inner plane? He said, it is for every soul. And it is not unnatural. It is a very natural phenomenon. It happens naturally, and it's a byproduct of love. The more the love, the sublime the experiences, the closer one gets to God. The closer one becomes to God. The soul, as the soul gets closer to God, the soul understands, not by mind, but by heart, understands that the soul is getting closer to God. And the soul realizes that the life is not his anymore, it's the life of the master. He is living the life for the master. He is living this life for him being a medium, for him being an instrument for God's will and plan on earth. Jai Baba.
Yeah, Jai Baba, thank you for all the beautiful talk and the sharings, which are really so heartfelt and wow. I was always wondering about Ali. What happened to him? Why he disappeared? It seemed to me that he disappeared. And I was always wondering, after all this love and all this effort that he made to come again and again, although he was imprisoned by his family. And after that, that Baba took him abroad. And then I didn't hear about him anymore. So
Yeah, you know, unfortunately the grip of the world is very strong. Now the reason for this gripping is strong is mainly because of the sanskars. I mean, we have made such a long journey from gaseous form all the way to human form, going through different bodies, experiencing different things, until we slowly start finding our path towards God. So the grip of the world is very strong. And that is why Baba says, beloved Baba, help us all to hold fast to your Dhamma till the very end, because that grip could go loose and we let go of his Dhamma. So our prayer all the time, we should be that, beloved God, help us all to love you more and more. Now, what happens to Ali, unfortunately we tried, but we couldn't find the last years of his life and how it was. But to some degree, I can share what Esfandiar told me later, because he was in contact with Ali as he was with Chota Baba. He said that Ali's father, to not let him run to Baba all the time, took him back and had him marry in Iran with a woman, and then took him to Pakistan because he had a business in Pakistan, and married him also to another woman in Pakistan. So he had two wives, one in Iran, one in Pakistan. And then Ali had told Esfandiar that my father wanted to bound me to this world so I won't be able to run away and go to Baba. And he did that to me, basically. Married me in two places. And then later years, they lost contact, and unfortunately, nobody really knows what happened to Ali.
آقا فرشید جمشید هستم از ایران.
جای بابا.
جای بابا عزیزم.
جای بابا. بفرمایید.
جای بابا. فرشید جان، من سوال داشتم در خصوص اسفندیار وصالی و اون اینکه ایشون زمانی که در خدمت بابا بودن دوست داشتن که پیش بابا بمونن. بعد بابا میفرمایند به ایشون که حضرت مهربابا که شما باید پیام عشق من رو به ایران ببری و بایستی که برگردی به ایران. میخواستم ببینم مأموریت اسفندیار وصالی در ایران از سوی حضرت مهربابا چی بوده؟
Bale. The question was, that Esfandiar wanted to stay with Baba when he was in Permasham, but Baba told him to go back to Iran and basically spread his message of love in Iran and be in Iran, which is true. And the question Jamshid also has is that what is Esfandiar's mission or duties for Iran and to Iranians? I mean, Baba really didn't give Esfandiar any duties, but he told him, go back to Iran, and I am there with you also, and try to love me there and spread my message of love. Huh? Oh, that was later. So anyway, he comes back to Iran. He obeys Baba 100% implicitly. To that extent that even after he came here many, many times to the West, at the end of his life, he decided that he needs to go back to Iran and drop his body there and, basically fulfilled Baba's instructions and orders. Now, the mission he had, he didn't say he directly had a mission. This much I can tell you that in 1990, late 90s, early 91, when my sister called me from Iran that you come to India, me and Esfandiar are going to India, and we want you to translate there. So I went. It's a long story. I don't want to go through the details, but when I went there, he said, because I brought up some questions to him, and I don't want to go through the details on that either. And then through those questions, when I asked him, he said, now that Baba has revealed my identity through you, maybe it's time for me to speak. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, we knew Esfandiar had met Baba. We had no idea, at least I had no idea, that he was in Paramashram or he was on the planes of consciousness or anything until I came to America, basically, and I read more about him and knew more about Baba. But then he said, now that Baba has revealed my identity through you, maybe it's time for me to speak about my experiences that could help others. And then he started. His first talk actually was in Mehrabad. There is a nice video that Sufis put together called the Premashram Memories, and that is available. There's a part of his talk in that video. It's a nice video, if you can get a hold of it. It might be actually on YouTube too, I'm not sure, called Premashram Memories. So indirectly, he did not really have a mission, but for my experience, I can tell you that sharing of his life, his love for Baba, the way he lived the life in Pramashram, and the way he lived his worldly life, but being with Baba, helped me and many, many other souls to realize that how one can live in the world, but not be of it. Live in the world, but be a pillar of Baba, be a messenger of Baba, be someone who can help Baba's work. So this is how much I can say, that indirectly or directly, he helped a lot of souls who wanted. He would speak to people who wanted to hear more of Baba, more about his, experiences, and also how to love Baba. He would explain very simple, in many simple words, that how one can start loving Baba and love Baba to the depth that one can possibly do. جمشید جان نمیدونم چقدرشو فهمیدی برات فارسی بگم. آقا جمشید.
باید اینو
Can I do a little bit of Persian for what I said for Jamshid?
Please.
Okay. جمشید جان
صدای من میاد؟
بله الان میاد. شما فهمیده من انگلیسی
صدای من میاد؟
بله. انگلیسی که گفتم فهمیدین یا فارسی بگم؟ فارسی بگم؟
من حدوداً فهمیدم ولی اگر بتونید در فارسی یه جمله به من بگی که مأموریتش با توجه به اینی که بابا فرمود پیام عشقشون رو
بله
در ارتباط با مأموریتش ایشون چه مأموریتی رو باید اجرا میکرد و آیا در مأموریتش موفق بود یا نبود؟
ببین مأموریتی که به اون صورت به طریق مستقیم بابا مأموریتی به هیچ کدوم از این بچه‌ها نداره. حتی به ما طریق مستقیم بابا مأموریتی نمیده. ولی هممون یه مأموریتی داریم. هممون یه وظیفه نسبت به بابا داریم. بابا میگه پیام عشق و اسم منو تا اونجا که میتونیم به همه برسونیم. تبلیغات نمیخواد بکنه ولی یه نفری که تشنه هست، یه روحی که تشنه هست، شما حس میکنین این روح میتونه استفاده ببره، باید در مورد بابا بهش بگید. حالا اسفندیار هم همینطوری بود، مأموریتی به اون صورت نداشت. من وقتی سال 1990 که رفتم هند اونجا پیشش بودم، حقیقتش سالایی پیش اومد ازش پرسیدم و اون به من گفتش که حالا که بابا گفته از طریق تو گفته که من کی هستم و چه کاری کردم تو پرمشرام، شاید وقتشه اینه من صحبتی بکنم، شاید کمکی به دیگران بشه. این شد مثل مأموریتی و شروع کرد صحبت کردن در مورد زندگی خودش با تو پرمشرام اونجا و بعدش اومد آمریکا در مورد زندگیش تجربهش اینا همه صحبت کرد. خیلی شنیدن، مستفیض شدن، استفاده کردن. بعدش هم چون بابا خواسته بود که کارشو بیشتر تو ایران انجام بده، برگشت ایران، بدنش اونجا ول کرد. همونجا که می‌بینید تو یزد بدنش اونجاست. و مأموریتی از بنده بپرسید، میگم مأموریتش عشق بود. مأموریتش پخش عشق بابا بود و اون چجوری بگم، اون حس بودن بابا و حضور در بابا رو برای همه ماهایی که دور برش بودیم آورد. بهمون نشون داد که چجوری میشه به بابا عشق ورزید و چجوری میشه به بابا نزدیک شد از طریق عشق. حالا آیا خودش نگفت بابا به من این مأموریت رو داد که بهتون بگم، ولی خودش گفت این چیزیه که من تو پرمشرام یاد گرفتم، حالا هم به شما میگم بتونید یاد بگیرید انجام. امیدوارم جواب داده باشم. مثلا
Hello everybody, Jay Baba. This is Nozer. Hi Farshid.
Jay Baba Nozer. Jay Baba.
Jay Baba آقای فریدون.
Jay Baba.
Well, really thanks for sharing, and this came to my mind that I could share a few because I had the good opportunity that I met Esfandiar. And my last time I met him was just a week before he dropped his body in Yazd. So I went to see him in Jafarabad, but he was in a different state of mind. And, you know, he was just in a different world. Like he was there, but he was not there. So anyways, and then after 1 week, he dropped his body. And I met him a couple of times before, even when he came to India, to Bombay, and then spent some time with him on the bus going to Mehrabad from Bombay. Yeah, it's, I mean, Prem Ashram, I would say, is Baba had these boys the souls that he prepared them, you know, germinated. I mean, first sowed the seed and then it germinated so that when they go back to their different homes, the people in that, around that place, in that, they benefit. I mean, they get Baba's energy, Baba's presence through them. And Esfandiar was one of them. And as I say, I had that great fortune to even go to his Tehran place, Koshunak, and Baba meetings there, and a couple of them. And anyways, Farshid, after I finish, if you can bring, I'll give you some time to go back in your memories and tell us the story about the orchard of cherries that Baba told him to go and pray to all the trees. So I will leave it to you. But three things I hadn't wanted to share, like his sense of humor, Esfandiars, you know, like a man of the world, and he had a very strong sense of humor, and then sometimes he would share with us. And before that, also when they were in that Prem Ashram, I think it was in the month of April or May, that Babajan came all the way from Pune in the car, and then she would be on the lower Merabat, on the other side of the tracks. And Baba took all the boys, but he stood on the other side of the track, and they were all went, and where Babajan was seated in the car, everybody went there, and I'm sure they kissed her hand that Baba told them to, you know, take Babajan's darshan. And Esfandiar was one of them. And coming back to this two incidents that he would always share, and it was really funny. He said, as boys, we would be with our father who was, you know, in the farm, and they had trees of pomegranates, and the pomegranates were as big as a huge coconut, that big they were. But the boys had no, like, guts to tell their father that they want to eat that pomegranate because they were, you know, there for the market to be sold, and it was an income. So the mischief mind, you know, although it's a sense of humor. So he said, as boys, we were tempted, and what to say. So we would go there quietly when the father was not there. We would let the pomegranates sit on the tree, but we would just crush it with our hands, and then we would make a small hole in that fruit, suck the juice, and then again blow it up back as if nothing has happened, and the pomegranate would look as good as fresh. And after a few days, the fruit would become dry by itself and start falling off the tree. And the father would not know what's going on. Why is that fruits are acting so strange? But he said that we were the mischievous one. Like, we wanted to have that pomegranate, but what to do? So we had to play these tricks. So it was a funny sense of humor. And second thing, he said that while traveling on the ship, I think it is coming back from India with Aga Baidul, and suddenly there was a huge storm, and, you know, the ship was going up and down, and, you know, the waves, and they all got scared. So poor Esfandiar, he ran into the toilet and he closed the door, thinking that that is the refuge, you know, he can take. And then Aga Baidul looked for him, and then he knocked the door. And he said, Esfandiar, what's happening? What? He said, I'm afraid. What's wrong? He said, I think the ship is going to drown, you know. He said, doesn't matter. The ship doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the shipping company. Why are you worried? Come out. So that was a funny thing he would, you know, kind of share with us. And he always had a chuckle out of those incidents. So anyway, I just thought it would be a little bit, you know, to add to the funny part of, you know, sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, as you said, we always felt Baba's presence, you know, when we would be there with Esfandiar. And I really had a couple of times, even one Silence Day, I was there. Farshid, I was at your home in Tehran where Amu Esfandiar came, and we spent the whole Silence Day, 24 hours with him. So thank you, Baba. Anyways, that's
Thank
me.
you.
And I mean, that's.
Thank you, Nozer. Yeah,
If you
thanks.
can share that cherries incident, if it comes to your mind, we would love to listen to it again. Thank you. Jai Baba, everybody.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Baba. Thank you. Yeah, God has a big sense of humor, and his followers have a sense of humor too. Esfandiar had a good sense of humor, yes. Now, Nozer wanted me to share the cherry tree story, which a lot of you probably know, but you know, when Esfandiar came back to Iran and later saw Baba again in 31, he didn't see Baba until 1963. Now every year, you know, he would write to Baba that, Baba, I'd like to come and see you. But the reply would come either Baba is in the West, or, you know, or is in seclusion, or, you know, doesn't basically accept any visitors, and it's not the darshan time and all that. So time passes and becomes 1962 that a lot of Baba lovers decide, you know, that was the East-West gathering, that a lot of Baba lovers decide to go visit Baba. And he didn't have any money. Esfandiar didn't have any money. So he writes to Baba that, Baba, now that you are giving East-West gathering, I don't have any money to come and visit you. What am I supposed to do? So Baba tells him, Baba through Baidu asks him, you know, what do you have? What do you do? What is your livelihood? And Esfandiar writes, you know, that, Baba, I have a cherry orchard, and basically I sell cherries every year, but the problem is a lot of years the frost comes and I don't get, you know, good cherries, so I really doesn't pay off. Baba says, okay, go to your cherry trees, go to every tree and tell the cherry tree that this year you have to give ample trees so I can sell them and go, you know, go to pilgrimage, go see Meher Baba. So under Baba's instruction, he goes to every tree. Now, there might have been, I think, 30, maybe 35 trees. So he goes to every one of them and says the same thing. You have to give a lot of cherries because I have to go see Meher Baba. You have to go give a lot of cherries, so I have to go see Meher Baba. And on and on and on. Now he says the 1962 Sahaba seas had come back, and the year comes of 1963, basically. He says it was the springtime, the cherry had blossomed, and I had, you know, said what Baba wanted me to, and the cherry had blossomed. And I knew, he said, you know, this is his face. He said, I knew that the cherries will give a lot of cherries. So he said, I borrowed money. I borrowed money and then didn't fly. I went overland until I got to Zahedan, which is a port. But there was a bridge that was washed away because of so much rain. So I had no other choice than get a flight from there and fly to India. So he said I flew to Bombay and went to Pune, stayed with Baba. It's a long story, but he stayed there with Baba for 28 days. And eventually he comes back. When he comes back, the cherry trees were full of cherries. He starts getting the cherries, packing them in the boxes, sending them off to the market. The truck driver who would come and pick up the cherries would ask Esfandiar, where are you bringing all these cherries? He would say, from these trees. He said, only from these trees? He said, yes. He said, I thought you have another orchard somewhere else that you're bringing them here. He said, only from these trees. He picked so much cherries and he gave out boxes of cherries to Baba lovers. I remember the box of cherry that came to our house from those cherries. And he said, not only I sold and paid off my trip expenses, also it paid off for my whole year of living expenses. But then after that, the cherry trees gave up and didn't give much cherries, and slowly they dried out. So they obeyed Baba's order, and then slowly they died. But that was the story of the cherry trees.
That's amazing. Well, Anne and Robin have a question. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Anne and Robin.
Farshid, I'm really glad you and Marjan are here, and I'm enjoying your talk. I have a question. Baba said that he was taking us, and I don't know if I'm included in the us, taking some of his lovers on the fast train under a veil. And I believe that means without consciously going through the planes. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, that is true. What Baba says is absolute truth. The problem of going through the path consciously is that the soul might get stuck in the plane because of the beauty of all the sceneries that the soul experiences. So that is why Esfandiar himself could not fully consciously experience the fourth plane of consciousness, because Baba says the soul on the fourth plane of consciousness can do miracles, can, make a dead to come to life. Basically can do a lot of things, can destroy world, create world, and all that. And Baba doesn't want that, doesn't want all these shows. So that's why he blocked him off, so he can use his love to love him even more. And he passed him through the fourth plane to the fifth plane. And that is for all of us, all the souls. He doesn't let them fully, I tell you, fully, consciously experience the planes of consciousness. But that doesn't mean that the soul, by going through the path, through love, does not consciously experience anything. They would, to some extent, to the extent that doesn't harm the soul, because the master is there to protect you. Baba is there to protect you. So you're going to experience what he wants you to experience, and that's it. It doesn't let you fully experience it to get stuck or, not be able to progress. But, our focus should not be experiencing the path. Our focus should be to love him more and more until we are no more. That should be our focus. When your focus is on that, as Bauji sometimes would say, you don't follow the path will follow you. And that is correct, because your focus is love, or his presence, or his love. And the path, although it's there, is following you, basically. You will feel and you will experience part of the experiences that Baba talks about in God Speaks and all that, but definitely not the full experience.
very beautiful what you said about the past and what Bauji said about the past following us. It's really very beautiful explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I was just wondering, you said that you were called to Mehrabad to translate for Esfandiar. Was that in 1988?
No, that was Christmas of 1990. And that's why, you know, I was there in late 90s and early 91.
Mm-hmm. That was when he came to Mehrabad?
That is correct.
Then I met him there. It was very, very special. Yeah. And he used to stay in the Dharamshala.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. And it was very beautiful. And he was very kind.
Yeah.
Very sweet. Because I'm not in the States and I'm not in Iran, so I can't see him, not here, not there. It was very special to meet him.
Yeah, he liked the Dharamsala because he said that was my school, and that was, you know, my first call to Baba, to God, basically. So he liked to be there.
That was the first time that I went there in 1988. I also was first time that I was in Mehrabad. I was in the Dharamshala. There was no space in the PC.
Yeah.
So for me, it's also a very heartful place.
Yeah. Yeah, he sometimes also would go sit on the veranda with Muhammad the Mass, and they would share, I mean, he would bring pistachio and raisins and, you know, things like that with him from Iran. So he would share that with Muhammad, and Muhammad loved that. He would grab it and laugh and eat. And at that time, Eriko was very kind. He would kind of say what Muhammad is saying and then translate what Esfandiar was saying for Muhammad. It was nice. Now, it's funny what you brought up, how souls can help each other. And that was something that, you know, that was something new to me also, because when I was in that trip with Esfandiar, and he would share things with Muhammad, that evening he told me, you know, I had a blockage. This is what Esfandiar told me. He said, I had a blockage that Muhammad helped me to cross that blockage. Now, what it was, I don't know, but this is how much he shared with me. And it was interesting that how the souls around Baba can help each other also. And that is a fact. That is a fact that he gives us that pleasure of his presence through other souls by share of that love. So when we share his love, a lot of things automatically helps. You know, I might say something that I'm not even conscious of, but that might help somebody else. And somebody else might say something that, or do something that, out of love, that would help me. So that's something I wanted to share with you too.
Thank you. There is one question from Alan. Alan, you're unmuted.
Yes. Hi. Good morning. Jai Baba. Actually, my question, you started to speak on it just now, which is, you know, being around Esfandiar, do you have any memories or any experiences within yourself where you had a change of heart, or you really experienced, because of being in Esfandiar's presence, or something he said, or maybe the way he looked at you, or, you know, that you found it was of immense help in that moment? Maybe you were having a challenging time, or, you know, he helped you with through something that, you know, you had a very challenging mental process with, perhaps?
Well, this much I can share with you, that when the call would come that he wanted me to be somewhere to translate for him, it was a feast of love for me. I mean, I had no hesitation. I would take and go. And a lot of times when I was translating for him, I was in total wreck. I would lose myself. I would lose the consciousness of my identity and would feel Baba's presence. It was total presence that would capture my mind and heart. And in a few occasions, it would be so overwhelming that I could not hold myself, and I had to leave. I had to leave the meeting. So that's how much I can share with you.
Janaki, you're unmuted.
Hi.
Hey,
Farshid. Thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm just so grateful for you to speak, because I feel Baba's love so much coming through. And just thank you.
Thank you, Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jay Papa, you're reflecting what all of us are feeling right now. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. I think that's all the questions we have. So if we wanted to, geez, it's so hard to let you go. Farshid, thank you so much.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you, Baba.
Can we do one more beloved God prayer?